Welcome back, learners. We have a lot more fascinating information about the seaside town of Ramsgate to share with you. Last time we began speaking of high-profile residents who have lived here, and will carry on where we left off. Chatham House Grammar School alumni are referred to as Old Ruimians, a word adapted from the Old Briton name for Thanet, Innis Ruim, which meant Isle of Marshes. In a study called Who's Who, which ranked schools based on the number of influential people that they produced, CHS scored 6th highest for public schools. Given the extensive list, a few highlights are Nick Turner of Hawkwind, the former Archbishop of South America Gregory Venables, and former Prime Minister Edward Heath. Next to the school is St George's Church, which has a memorial to Sir William Curtis, who we will discuss a little later. It is also the location where comic actor John Le Mesurier is buried. He famously played Sergeant Wilson in the classic sitcom Dad's Army, one of my favourites. He lived at 8 London Road for 13 years with his third wife Joan Marlin. Another great comic actor, whose work was inspiration for the writers of Dad's Army, was Will Hay. Hay lived in Ramsgate, just opposite the library. He was one of the best loved performers in his time, and in 1938 was ranked as the 3rd highest grossing star. Speaking of stars, he was also an astronomer, and for his work in the field an asteroid was named after him. He was also a keen pilot, and gave flying lessons to Amy Johnson, who would later become the first woman to fly solo from London to Australia. To bring this full circle, there is a scene in an episode of Dad's Army in which John Le Mesurier's character has to wear protective motorcycle gear. Private Walker comments that he looks like Amy Johnson.
The 19th century saw a rise in people promoting a meat-free diet. In 1847, a society meeting in the Northwood Villa Hydropathic Institute formed and chose their new name. They merged the word vegetable with the suffix "arian", which describes a believer or supporter, and became the Vegetarian Society. The society still runs today and continues to grow. Notable members have included Peter Cushing, Jerome Flynn, Mahatma Gandhi, and of course, Paul and Linda McCartney.
Near King George VI Park is a mausoleum. It was built as a replica of Rachel's tomb in Bethlehem.
Rachel being the wife of Jacob and the mother of Joseph, the one with the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Montefiore was a philanthropist, social reformer, and one of the richest men in the 19th century. He had bought the grounds in Eastcliff Lodge for personal use, but gave the then Princess Victoria a key, allowing her access whenever she wished. In 1845, he served as High Sheriff of Kent. His work had him mentioned in writing by James Joyce and Charles Dickens. Montefiore, who died at the age of 100 in 1885, was known for his wit. One anecdote tells that at a dinner party he was seated next to a known anti-Semite. The man told Montefiore that he had just returned from a trip to Japan,
where they have neither pigs nor Jews.
Montefiore is reported to have responded immediately,
"In that case, you and I should go there, so it will have a sample of each."
Another of the country's wealthiest men also made his home here, Sir William Curtis, aka Billy Biscuit. He built Cliff House for himself and hosted his friend King George when he would visit.
Curtis made his fortune by expanding his father's bakery and having them sell sea biscuits to the British Navy. He also owned ships that would ferry convicts to Australia. He became an MP for London and a supporter of William Pitt, and was known for holding incredible banquets.
He had a reputation for being poorly educated, which was not helped when he once made a speech for the Board of Education in which he presented a toast to 3 R's: reading, writing and arithmetic.
Despite being unpopular in some circles for his political views, and having a hand in the whaling trade, the eccentric, colourful character was well loved in his hometown of Ramsgate. He died on 18th January 1829. Every shop in town closed on this occasion, and his funeral cortege was followed by an immense crowd halfway to Canterbury, on its way to Essex where he was buried.
Around the same time, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, a founder of the Romantic movement in England, often stayed in Ramsgate, usually on Wellington Crescent or Plains of Waterloo. He was present when the harbour gained royal status. He found the town allowed him to relive his youth, and he did much of his writing here. He found himself a secret cave at Dumpton Gap along the Eastcliff, from which he enjoyed dips in the sea.
Coleridge liked visiting his hole in the wall, but at around the same time another man named Joseph Croom Pettit became known locally as the Hermit of Dumpton Cave. Behind the old Hollicondane Tavern on College Road was a chalk cave that he moved into in 1820 at the age of 78. He had furnished it with a bed, which was in a recess he had carved into the wall, a fireplace, a wash tub, a table that he had made himself, a kettle and other utensils, and a chicken coop. He always wore a blue handkerchief on his head to hide a severe wound he had suffered while working as an ornamental plasterer. Although the idea may seem crazy to some, it was said that Joseph was a highly intelligent man, full of wisdom and knowledgeable about his Christian faith. His story was that he had worked hard all his life in a busy world before retiring, and now he simply wanted to separate himself from it all and prepare himself to meet his maker. The site and tavern were demolished, and the grounds are now part of St Lawrence College. The school has its own notable alumni, including actor Alexander Siddig and our own Freddie.
Another prolific writer regularly visited in the 1870s. Wilkie Collins, often regarded as the father of detective fiction, set a number of his books in the town, including The Law and Lady. He stayed at Nelson Crescent, Wellington Crescent, and the Hotel Granville. He discovered the town whilst spending time with his friend and mentor Charles Dickens. In 1876, 22-year-old Vincent van Gogh lost his job as an art dealer in Paris and was offered a place teaching at Stokes Boarding School on Royal Road.
He was given room and board but no salary. He very much enjoyed his time at the small school where he taught French, German and literature. He arrived in April, but in June the school moved to Isleworth and he went with it. In a letter to his brother he wrote, "There's a harbour full of all kinds of ships, closed in by stone jetties running into the sea on which one can walk, and further out one sees the sea in its natural state, and that's beautiful." Near his home at 11 Spencer Square there is a bust of the artist by Anthony Paget signifying his short time there.
In 1879, Karl Marx stayed at 62 Plains of Waterloo, just off the seafront, while visiting his daughter and grandson who lived nearby. He is quoted as saying, "The weather here is partly good and partly bad, with the latter tending to predominate."
Ramsgate Library was originally built and paid for by Andrew Carnegie in 1904. He's probably best well known for building Carnegie Hall, the concert venue in New York, and the Peace Palace in the Netherlands. Sadly, only a few months away from its centenary, the library was completely destroyed in an arson attack in August 2004, with only the Edwardian facade remaining. Number 8 Paragon was the holiday home of Charles Darwin, author of The Origin of Species. He brought his daughter Annie here in 1850, hoping the sea air and bathing would improve her ill health.
On the Westcliff is a boating pool, which was constructed in 1961. It was previously a bandstand between the two pavilions, used for refreshments and entertainments. The buildings remain intact and they became a monkey sanctuary during the 1980s. More recently, it became a pop-up bar with the charming name Ramsgate Arms by the Sea at the Monkey House.
Ramsgate has upwards of 900 listed buildings, and over 200 of them are congregated around the harbour. Ramsgate Harbour was originally built as a safe haven for ships that may be caught in treacherous North Sea storms or wrecked on the Goodwin Sands. It outgrew Sandwich and became a hugely important location in its own right. Ramsgate was a main embarkation port from the UK during the Napoleonic Wars. On one occasion, 40,000 troops embarked from the town. It became a military base with the navy making use of the harbour and garrisons on both cliffs. Jane Austen's brother Francis led a naval militia known as the Sea Fencibles, who defended the south coast. Jane herself visited on occasion, and the town features in a few of her books and poems. Though this military presence did not stop it from being a lively place for entertainment. Aside from Billy Biscuit's banquets with the Prince Regent at Cliff House, the Duke of Clarence hosted a ball at Bears Albion Hotel in 1811, which according to the Times paper,
"In fashion, splendour and elegance exceed anything of the kind ever witnessed in that part of the kingdom."
In 1940 the Germans occupied France and the British forces were in retreat. They were surrounded and were driven back to Dunkirk. It was time to evacuate. The town and port had suffered bombing and there was nowhere for ships to dock.
A plan of action was needed, and it became known as Operation Dynamo. Lifeboats and small ships from the east coast were sent to their rescue, and Ramsgate was a major contributor.
The Prudential was the first of about 850 little ships to leave Ramsgate. The smallest was the Tamsin, a 4.6 metre fishing ship that is now preserved in the Imperial War Museum, London. Another notable participant was the Sundowner. It was a motor yacht owned by Charles Lightoller, former second officer of the Titanic. The seas were already dangerous to sail, especially for the small vessels, but at this time they were also being watched by hostile German submarine ships and bombers. Despite this, several ships made numerous trips back and forth. It was anticipated that they would be evacuating about 30,000 Brits, but the little ships rescued around 338,000 Allied troops. This made Operation Dynamo the largest military evacuation in history.
Many of the troops were taken to Ramsgate train station for care. The station was designed by Edwin Maxwell Fry, whose work can be found all over the UK, India and Africa. In 2009, the station offered the UK's first high-speed railway service connecting the coast to London St Pancras.
Nowadays, Ramsgate Harbour boasts the largest Wetherspoons pub in the world inside the Royal Victoria Pavilion. The building was originally a theatre and was later converted into a casino before becoming the watering hole it is today in 2018.
This is Ellington Park. Beneath the park are a series of cave tunnels. They connect the old Ellington House to nearby places such as the church and even Pegwell Bay.
In the 17th century, Ellington House was owned by Adam Sprackling, a cavalier who had supported Charles I. He was a rich, spoiled man with a violent temper, who spent his time gambling and drinking in pubs, getting into fights, and was often in trouble with the law. On the 11th of December, 1652, Adam was at home, drunk, when his wife Catherine arrived. He threatened to beat her, so she hid in a cupboard. He found his pickaxe and was ready to smash through the door, when luckily for her, a neighbour, Mr. Lamming, happened to call round. Adam was distracted and invited him into the kitchen for some wine. As they drank, Catherine snuck out of the cupboard and went upstairs. Adam and Mr. Lamming were soon joined by the servant and another neighbour. They all got very drunk. The maid took this opportunity to escort Adam's daughter through the underground tunnels to a safe place. Catherine, however, had a different idea. She entered the kitchen where the four men were still drinking.
As Catherine entered the kitchen, Adam soon became enraged and stabbed her in the face with a knife. He then grabbed an axe as she made a run for the door, nearly severing her hand completely off.
The other men tried to stop him, but he punched them out of the way. Finally, he used a meat cleaver to kill Catherine.
The servant managed to slip away and ran to find help from police. Adam planned to frame Mr. Lamming for the murder, as he lay too drunk to move. He killed 6 dogs and threw them over his wife's body before smearing Lamming with blood. He entered a trap door in the kitchen, leading into the tunnels, and intended to seek sanctuary in the church, but the lawmen were already coming after him. They followed him into the tunnels and caught him attempting to light some gunpowder barrels. He was carrying a pistol and sword which were confiscated, and he was put in a boat to be taken to Sandwich for trial.
When news of his capture reached the public, people came forward with stories of other things that he'd done, including using the tunnels for smuggling. It was also discovered that Sprackling had shot and killed another man named Robert Langley in 1648. Adam Sprackling was quickly found guilty of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. He and Catherine were buried at St. Lawrence Church. Catherine and her dogs were recently commemorated with wood carvings in the wildlife area of the park. Nobody knows what happened to his daughter, and some have said that she got lost in the cave network and her ghost still haunts them today. Others have said the sounds of ghostly footsteps were probably just echoes from horses' hooves at the nearby stables.
Westcliff Hall was built into the cliff and its roof forms part of the promenade. It opened as a concert hall just 2 days before the outbreak of war in 1914. It is the smallest of 3 that were built this way along the southeast coast. They were designed with the idea that concerts could be held indoors or outdoors depending on the weather, but only Ramsgate's venue retains this feature. The Rolling Stones famously played here in 1964. In 1985 it became a motor museum, but since that closed in 2005 it has been derelict. It is hoped that it will one day be restored as a music venue, as its excellent location, the views it offers, and its unique capability of responding to the weather make it one of a kind. Chances are good that something may happen soon, as the building supports the walkway and road above it, and as much of the interior is rusted and weakening, renovation is necessary to prevent it caving in.
Ramsgate used to set its clock 5 minutes and 41 seconds faster than Greenwich Mean Time. This allowed ships a more accurate reading when they were approaching the harbour. It's not often you hear that a Kentish town is ahead of the times.
Being in Ramsgate today, you'd be forgiven for not realising how significant a place it has been throughout history. Ramsgate no longer has its international hoverport, its cross-channel ferry lines, or its municipal airport that closed in 1968, replaced by an industrial estate. It doesn't have royal or celebrity visitors making regular visits and befriending locals. But it is still a unique seaside town, full of character, and its contribution to the basis of British culture is second to none.
No wonder if you rearrange the letters that spell Ramsgate, you can see that it's megastar.